Animal Land by John Hauge. Prologue. It was that time of year. Everett liked to watch man's feeble attempts to collect honey from the hives that dotted the edge of Animal Land. Man knew he was going to be stung, but couldn't resist the honey. Each year the bees filled up honey stocks to survive the winter. Each year man came to take it away. The bees would, of course, always rally together and fend off man, but it was never a complete victory. Many bees died. Some hives were destroyed. A lot of honey was taken. Next year, the hives are rebuilt and the bees work once again to build up honey stocks. This pattern has repeated itself over and over since as long as Everett could remember. Even so, it was still enjoyable to watch. The plight of the bees had all of the elements of good entertainment. Tragedy. The dumb bees keep doing the same thing year after year, despite the fact that a good portion of their work will never be enjoyed. Comedy. The dumb men frantically running around swatting hopelessly at the bees as they went after the honey. If the bees could keep their honey, the next year there would be less work to do. This would allow the younger bees to have a better life with new choices. The queen bees keep telling the worker bees that they have to stay the course, that the way to survive is to continue to rebuild hives and keep making honey for both the winter and for the inevitable loss to man. The queen bees have no vision. They are doing what they've been told by their parents and have no motivation to change. Man is no smarter than the bees. They keep using the same painful methods to get the honey, the same painful methods handed down to them from their parents. Yet, the honey is so attractive that they are willing to keep getting stung. So even though the outcome is the same, Everett couldn't help but watch. Everett set up his telescope to watch the entertainment. It wasn't long before a group of men arrived on the edge of Animal Land where the hives were. Everett hoped that the bees would do better against man, not because he was rooting for them, but because that would prolong the show. And speaking of the show, man wasn't moving very fast. Normally, man goes quickly to get the honey, as if a surprise attack would change the outcome. Something was different this time. This time man was setting up a fire. They looked like a bunch of boys on a cookout rather than men facing the enemy. They were not even wearing the typical heavy leather clothing. Smoke started to emerge from the ground. The men looked cheerful as they watched the emerging fire. This was not the usual dread of the anticipation of the pain from the venom of the bees. The men were plotting something. Man has changed tactics, thought Everett. Part of Everett enjoyed this twist in the story. Another part of Everett was disappointed that the action had not started. The dumb bees. They have to know that the men are there ready to attack, but they refuse to make the first move. The bees could have the element of surprise, but generations of indoctrination prevent a proactive attack, surmised Everett. Everett watched as the men wrapped fresh leaves around large sticks. This didn't make much sense. It was the middle of the day, so man didn't need torches to see. The fresh leaves made the torches smoke a lot of smoke. Everett's first reaction was to hope that the smoke wouldn't obscure his witnessing the upcoming stinging. The men approached the trees with the hives above and allowed the smoke to engulf the hives. One of the men set up a ladder and went up to the hive. There were no signs of the bees swarming and attacking. They were just sitting in the hive letting it happen. What was this magic smoke? Was it something in the leaves? Everett was amazed. It was like watching a lion give birth to a camel. The bees were completely under man's control. What power, thought Everett. Everett knew that man was clever. He had collected hundreds of items from man. Inventions of all sorts. Perhaps the greatest invention was this telescope that allowed him to watch this even newer technology. Now, clever man has a new invention, a new weapon, smoke. Everett watched as man walked from hive to hive collecting honey. After the honey was taken, all man had to do was burn the hive and all of the bees would be dead. But this didn't happen. Man had the ultimate weapon, yet did not use it to defeat his enemies. He used it just to maintain the status quo, only now without any painful stings. At first, this surprised Everett, but after a few moments of thought, it made sense. It was the honey. Man could have taken all of the honey, but then the bees would have all died. So despite being stung, they left a minimal amount of honey to keep the bees alive. By doing that, man ensures that honey is available next year. Now with the new weapon, getting honey is as easy as going to the river to drink water, thought Everett. The whole scene inspired Everett. If man could end the long-running tradition of getting stung, what other long-running traditions could end? Where can I find some smoke of my own? Chapter 1. Victory Parade. A lion walked through the parade staging area. He inspected each float. It was not an inspection to find fault, but an inspection to see the final product of a massive effort to get the floats ready to show and give credit and praise for those responsible. Every detail was scrutinized by the lion. The float creators knew that there would be an inspection, but did not realize that it was more than just ceremonial. A lot of work went into the floats. The lion appreciated the effort put into each float. This inspection was to make sure that the creators of the floats knew he appreciated their efforts. The parade was for the victory over Animal Land's most feared enemy, man. The Victory Parade was becoming a repeated event since the founding of Animal Land. It was important for the next generation to appreciate the effort it took to keep Animal Land free. No expense was missed on creating the floats. The celebration must be bigger than any other event that could possibly happen in Animal Land in the foreseeable future. The name of the lion doing the inspection and doling out the praise was Ronald. He was the son of Animal Land's leader. As such, he has had high expectations placed on him since the day he was born. He took the responsibility head on and distinguished himself as a true hero in this last war that just ended. After the inspection, Ronald went to see his friend Stuart. He now had the data to back up his words. This is going to be the best parade ever. Stuart was the largest elephant in all of Animal Land. He was Ronald's best friend, and Ronald was Stuart's best friend. Some would say it would be odd for an elephant to have a best friend as a lion, but Ronald was special. A year of waging war together had cemented a bond that had begun in school. Stuart agreed with Ronald's prediction, but he had another issue he wanted to take up with his friend. Stuart's trunk pointed at Ronald to add emphasis. Agreed, but this parade can serve more than the one obvious purpose. As you walk through the parade, keep an eye out for the ladies looking from the sides. Ronald was not surprised by the words. With Stuart, it was expected. Is there any time you aren't thinking about the ladies, Stuart? Stuart thought about the question for a moment, but then decided that, even in the heat of an attack, part of his mind was not on the task at hand. What is your point? Ronald had a well-thought-out answer. I'm looking for a special someone, not just anyone who happens to catch my eye as I'm walking by. You should want the same. Don't you want to find someone special? Stuart replied with much less thought. Why? They're all special when they are with me. Ronald pressed him a bit more. By special, I'm saying the one to spend the rest of your life with. In a most pragmatic and logic manner, he explained the main difference between both of their philosophies when it came to the female persuasion. 1. Why? Have only one lady elephant out of Animal Land feel special? I think it is better to have all of the females feel special. Don't? You. Ronald wasn't buying this. Stuart was a dear friend, but on this Ronald would have to disagree. There were two types of females. There were the ones that would see your battle scars and pounce on you, and the ones that would see your scars and try and convince you that it was time to make a nice den and raise lots of cubs. Stuart's egalitarian view was more open-minded than his. It didn't make Stuart a bad elephant, just one with different priorities. However, when it came to the main priority, they were in complete agreement. The main priority was the only one that counted. The main priority they both shared was the devotion to the defense of Animal Land above all else. Not so long ago, a group of circus animals rose up and fought man for their freedom. They defeated the human circus owner and marched west into the frontier. When the animals could no longer see any signs of man, they stopped and settled. This new place was called Animal Land. In Animal Land, the animals governed themselves. In Animal Land, the animals lived their lives doing what they wanted to do, not what man wanted them to do. Stuart was the animal personification of this philosophy. Although Stuart's main priority was the defense of Animal Land, when Animal Land was not in danger, Stuart spent his life doing what he wanted to do most. This primarily consisted of chasing female elephants. Animal Land was now at peace, and Stuart was back in the chasing mind frame. He continued. Don't? You don't like it when the females jump on you. Ronald sensed a trap with this question. I reckon I can't disagree with that. But I want to fall in love with a nice lioness. Well, good luck to you, my fierce lion friend. Fruit is falling all around and hitting you on the head. Yet, instead, you want to climb the tree to get the one piece that will not fall. Ronald smiled. Stuart had a point, but he did as well. That's the only one worth getting. Stuart let Ronald have the last word. The two took up their positions in the lineup for the parade. Just over a small hill, the other animals of Animal Land were lying down eagerly awaiting the start. After so much war, so much death, so much sacrifice, a day of celebration was in order. The parade was to prove to be more spectacular than any of the animals could have imagined. Stuart and Ronald completed the ensemble. The parade leader, a lark, acknowledged as much by starting to sing. The other larks followed. The sound of the birds built up quickly and grew in an intensity proportional to the number of larks. The intensity was also helped by the small hill which reflected their sounds back. On the other side, the audience animals could also hear some of the singing as splashes of sound spilled over the hill. They knew that this meant that the parade would start soon. As the ensemble got up and started to move, the larks quieted back down and flew down the route to formally signal the start. Leading the parade on the ground were the chimpanzees. Red paint from crushed berries exaggerated their features, giving them a menacing look. Not the cute and cuddly appearance that people lined up to see at the circus. The red made their eyes larger and their mouths larger. The colors worn this day had a different purpose, that of crowd pleaser. From up close, the irony of the war paint and tranquil singing made for a nice beginning of a parade. Next in the parade came an honor guard of lions. Adorning the sides of the lions were the black painted symbols of men. Some lions had only one, while some had more. The artwork wasn't impressive. It was simple stick figures, but the shapes made it clear that they illustrated man. What they represented meant much more. They were the most coveted and prized designations in all of Animal Land. The paint was not meant to please the crowd, but it did have an effect on the crowd. One could not add the stick figures for the parade. One had to earn their stick figures through actions in war. Each figure represented a kill in battle. Those with 5 or more kills in battle were considered aces. Many of those who sought to gain the right to be adorned with a stick figure on their side and walk with these markings did not survive to see this glorious day. Those without the markings watched from the sidelines and marveled. 2 lionesses, Mar-E and Stefani, watched from the sidelines. The females of Animal Land never missed a parade. The parade allowed for the viewing of all of the eligible single war hero animals in one place. Nothing symbolized the concept of hero better than the number of stick figures painted on the side of an animal. Stick figures give an animal character. That was a common saying by young female animals who were looking for future mates. The saying was to convey that courage is sexier than looks. Stefani paid close attention to the stick figures as they moved slightly up and down with the steps of the lions. They look mighty fine, don't you think? Mar-E was not as impressed. It takes more than stick figures, Stefani. The one for me would have to pass 3 tests. Mar-E, are you kidding? These lions fought man in war. They're good looking. What could be the third? How many more qualifications do they need? Mar-E put her paw to her chest and tilted her head slightly. You can't see what's in their heart by watching them on parade. Stefani wasn't agreeing. You're crazy. They are all just dreamy. Don't they just make you want to dress up like a man and be pounced? Mar-E giggled and blushed at the notion. You're so bad, Stefani. Just plain bad. Stefani rolled her eyes up to the left. She did not want to confirm nor deny. Behind the lions, a dozen captured men with harnesses were pulling a large float. Chains connected the harnesses to the men. The clinging of the chains was now a sound of victory instead of the sound of tyranny. The float was a large truck with a flatbed. In the back were a collection of tigers. On top of the cab was a tiger wearing a special black hat and black cape. The cape had holes in it, and it was plain to see from the tattered and frayed ends that the cape was old. The tiger was perched on the cab as if the cab was the bluff overlooking all of Animal Land. Down below, the men struggled to pull the truck. The motion of the truck was silent except for the squeaking springs. A large flexible branch with no leaves hung over the men. With a simple paw push, the branch swung down and hit the men pulling the truck. With each hit came a cheer from those observing the spectacle. Every war had prisoners. Many had argued for killing all men. They believed that man could never be retrained to believe that animals were meant to be free, not in cages. That releasing prisoners would invite them to start another future war. Their case was pretty good. The fact that no animals were ever returned to Animal Land at the end of all of the wars reinforced the notion that man could never be retrained. But there was a belief that Animal Land's culture and ideals were superior to that of man's world. In keeping with this, it was necessary to let the prisoners go. The ideals of Animal Land were not infringed upon by some blatant acts of humiliation of the prisoners. The humiliation would only be known to the animals and to their fellow prisoners. If man chose to not talk about the parade back in man's world, then any harm would end as the parade ended. Humiliation did not leave any lasting signs of physical injury. They would not be maimed, like so many animals were during the war. They would return to their homes in just the same shape that they were in when they left their homes. As for psychological injury, there may be some lasting effects from the humiliation. This was deemed not only acceptable, but critical. It was hoped that the experience of participating in the parade should be so abhorrent to man that they would never attack Animal Land again. A contingent of horses followed the tigers. They changed formations from single file to 4 astride columns to boxes to circles, then back to single file. On their sides were depictions of the battles. One set of pictures from the last war showed how the chimps would sneak up on man and steal their guns ahead of the attacks of the lions and tigers or stampede of the elephants. Some of the pictures were from previous wars, pulled from the historical canyons for the parade. The battles and tactics had not changed much over the years. Animals would lie in ambush and attack man without warning. Man always had superior weapons, so they had to wait until man got close. The scenes showed the man traps where they would fall through some branches and into deep pits. There were others showing boulders rolling down the hills, crushing men. The rotation of the horses made sure that each scene was visible by both sides of the parade audience. Some depictions were historical, like the ones that showed the founding animals coming into the valley to establish Animal Land. Most were about the wars, the first war of independence and the subsequent wars waged to defend Animal Land against man. A few new ones were created to commemorate the war that had just ended. When it came to historical depictions, they typically were more about the hero animals and not as much about the events. It was primarily up to the animal to recite the actual events, rather than to draw them out. So, history lessons became a series of historical events with the animals that played major roles. These animals would then tell the stories to provide the details. The most stirring of all the depictions was that of Bernard's departed family. These were not just stick figures, but very elaborate drawings. They showed detailed features that made each tiger recognizable by those who knew the family. The picture had Bernard's 2 sons, as well as his daughter with her mate, and their 3 cubs all up in a blue sky, looking down on what was obviously a portrayal of the parade. The war had claimed Bernard's entire family. Man had infiltrated the lines and attacked his daughter's family at her den, killing all. Bernard's 2 sons came to rescue their sister's family, but man had the advantage. The expressions on the family faces were a mixture of hate, terror, and pain. The imagery was as powerful as those of the founding of Animal Land and the sacrifices made by the founding animals. As the horse carrying the depiction of Bernard's family passed, many in the crowd looked up symbolically to see if they were looking down. All of the animals sat at attention in honor of their fallen comrades. Animal Land was a small and close community. It was very hard for any animal to die without at least 10 others being affected. After the somber came a change. The animals watching the parade went from quiet reflection to 4 quick cheers. The cheers were for the depictions of the 4 laws, 1 cheer for each law. The 4 laws were what it was all about: the war, the sacrifice, everything. The pattern repeated along the parade route like a slow wave in a pond. The audience was mainly the young animals and the old. They did not participate in the war. However, for the young, the romantic presentation of the victory, the war paint, and the stick figures of man served to spark their imaginations. They could envision that one day, they too, could be marching with the next generation of Animal Land heroes, with their young watching from the sidelines. Others could envision themselves as proud parents watching their young marching. There was no greater measure of success as a parent than to see their young marching in the parade as defenders of Animal Land. The old animals in the audience could no longer participate in war. Some of them never had time to have young. For these animals, sitting on the sideline was a realization that too much time had elapsed. Some of them just got old. For these animals, the parade was a chance to relive their youth as well as commemorate the loss of friends and family. For some, it was the last chance to do so. For all of the animals, it was a sad realization that the dream of living a life free of any future threats by man was just that, still a dream. The founding animals knew that it would be a long-term process to carve out a nation of free animals, free to determine their own destinies. But with each war, the realization of that dream seemed to be always just one generation away, never getting closer. After the horses came the elephants with some additional lions and tigers riding on their backs. It was a tough act to follow. They also were painted with the black stick figures of men based on their contributions to the war. Stuffed puppets in the shape of man added a bit of color to the parade. The elephants would grab the man dolls and toss them into the air with their trunks. A lion or tiger would then leap off the backs of the elephants and catch them with their teeth and land on an adjacent elephant. They would then spit them out to the audience. This was the chance the audience had to participate as they would fling the dolls back at the elephants, who would then spear the dolls with their tusks. The pattern would then repeat itself until the dolls were reduced to a collection of tattered rags. One had to arrive early and save a seat close to the sidelines of the parade in order to have the best chance at catching a doll and throwing it back. Each part of the parade was special, but many of the young waited for the rogue horse. There was always one horse chosen to be set apart from the rest of the formations. This horse dragged a full-sized likeness of a man dressed in standard animal keeper attire. This effigy of a typical circus animal trainer was the symbol of oppression. The roving horse would cut in front of various parade animal participants, the lions, elephants, and others, and allow them the opportunity to trample the man figure. The young would laugh at the sight and cheer. With each trample, more stuffing of straw would be released from the seams, making the man figure flatter and flatter. By the end of the parade, the man figure would be an empty shirt and pants set without any straw stuffing left. A noticeable gap followed the elephants. The audience animals quieted down as the next group, the camels, approached. 2 jeeps were towed by the camels. The jeeps were covered in flowers and leaves. It was hard to tell the lines of the jeeps. Other than the turning wheels and the same squeaking sounds heard from the earlier truck, one would be hard-pressed to know that a vehicle once driven by man was underneath. Honored hero animals from the war before the last war rode atop of the jeeps. Additional chimpanzees walked alongside the jeeps. Different music came from the larks. Not the upbeat and fast tunes heard earlier, but tunes that were much slower and using notes on the bottom of the musical scale. Another distinct gap followed. A gathering of the lead animals followed. A banner surrounded the animals with each animal holding on with their mouths. The animals were in a 1-2-2, one formation from small to large. At the front was the lead chimpanzee, Charles. Then a pair of warrior cats followed. The head tiger, Jesse, was on one side, with the head lion, Ronald, on the other side. The next pair had the lead horse on the right, Margaret, and the lead camel, Everett, on the left. At the end was the lead elephant, Stuart. The connecting ribbon and alignment, solely by size, symbolized the unity of Animal Land. The group of leader animals stopped, and the assembled animals surrounded them and began cheering. Those animals who participated in the parade also stopped and returned to join in with the cheering. The men towing the truck were pointed back to the frontier towards man's civilization and allowed to return to tell their comrades of the parade and celebration. Normally, a parade would start or end with the political leader, but not this parade. This was a parade to celebrate Animal Land, not its leader. The leader of Animal Land, Alistair, sat on the sidelines along with the rest and watched just as any other animal. This was a tradition that started with the first leader of Animal Land. There was never to be a ringleader. There was never going to be a master of ceremonies calling out the action. This was too close to what the founding animals fled from. It was impossible to run a community without a leader. But the founding animals wanted a leader that did not need the personal gratification of being admired as the center of a parade. The females of Animal Land gathered around the heroes of the war after the parade. Stuart was in his glory. Ronald felt something was missing. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a familiar face from Cubhood. She looked like Mari, he thought. During the war, there was so much else to think of that he had completely lost track of Mari. Now, as he shook his back to shed off the lionesses surrounding him, he couldn't help but wonder what Mari was planning to do now that the war was over. She was his destiny, defined before the war. Would she still see in him the same future as he saw in her? Ronald turned his head to get a better look and to confirm that the lioness that he saw was Margie, but he didn't see her. Surely she hadn't left already, he thought. He thought about leaving to look for her, but Stuart talked him out of it. The celebration continued on through the night. The numbers dwindled as the old and young left to go back to their lives. Eventually, even Stuart had to call it a night. Tomorrow was a new day, a new start at building the dream. But mostly it was a return to peace. Yes, there was some rebuilding to be done, but that was nothing compared to war.